So there's a bunch of stuff we can configure. And what exactly can we configure there, or what could be interesting to us? Well, things like quiet allow you to change the way things get logged or output by the server. And if you feel like it's talking too much to you, you can control that with quiet. And obviously check out the official docs for more detailed explanations of all the options. Interesting to us is the log path and also another setting, the dbpath, which you can find a bit further down towards the end of this list. These two paths allow you to configure where your data gets stored in the case of dbpath, because MongoDB of course does write your data to real files on your system. So the db path is where these files will live. And the log path is essentially where the logs will be written to. And the logs are interesting because in the logs you can then see, for example, warnings of JSON schema validation warnings if you set the validation action to warning, what we did in a previous module. So log path and db path can be set. Now how do we set this? I'm in my MongoDB folder, and there I got that bin folder. Now in this MongoDB folder, I'll create a new path and I'll name it db. And I'll create another new folder and I'll name it logs. You can name these folders however you want. Now these are two new folders and I want to use the db folder for my db files and the logs folder for my logs. The default setting for db is that it will use my root folder and there the data db folder. That is the default setting of MongoDB. And if you start a MongoDB instance without any additional setting, it will use that folder. But you can tell it to use another folder. And the same is true for the logs. You can tell it to not output its log messages in the window where you started the MongoDB instance, but instead into a separate file. And I want to do these two things. Now on Mac, I can get the path to my db folder by clicking on it with a right click and then get info and then copying that path. On Windows in the Explorer, you can of course just copy that URL by clicking into it once so that it becomes a full URL and then copying that. And now if I want to start my MongoDB server with that path being used, I can run sudo mongod, or on Windows it would just be mongod, --db path like this, then a blank, and then the path. And now important, I just copied the path to my MongoDB folder. Of course, I should point to the /db folder. On Windows, it's \db. Hit enter, and enter your password if you have to, and this should bring up your MongoDB server as it worked in the past, but now you should see that in the db folder, it created a bunch of files because now it's storing the data here. And therefore, this is now using a totally different database storage than it previously did. It's totally detached from our old database path. We have a brand new database setup now because we're using a different file storage for the database files. Now, logging would also be interesting. So let me quickly clear the window to make it easier to read. Let me quickly rerun sudo mongod here with dbpath, but I'll set an additional flag separated with a blank and then --logpath. And now I want to use almost the same path, this one. However, it should be /logs and that's important to know, the logs, the log path, needs the path to a log file. So here you could add log.log, for example. If you hit enter, this now starts the server, but you see way less output here, because now if you look into logs, you should have a log.log file. Now all the output gets written into that file. And that of course can be useful, because now this file will get saved and you can always come back to it, check your logs from yesterday, go through it, see any warnings or errors you might have in there, like this warning that access control is not enabled, which is the default right now. We got no authentication. We'll add it later. So this can be useful for, well, persistent error searching or for simply persistent auditing of your server. So this now is how you can set a custom path for your logs and how you can set a custom path for your database. What else can we do?